Hi guys, welcome back. We are now proceeding with our first economic system, which is basically a market economic system. I already introduced this by the way in the previous video. And we discussed that a market economic system is an economic system where most of the economic decisions, what, how, for whom to produce, and most of the economic decisions and all the resource allocation decisions are made by consumers and firms through demand and supply, rather than by the government telling us what to do, or telling the consumers and the firms what to do and how to make those decisions, right? And we also discussed that prices are determined in the markets and they guide what is to be produced, how it is to be produced, and for whom it is to be produced. I mean, the prices signal us, the producers, to what is to be made. Obviously, you'll end up making what is in demand, right? And firms produce goods that consumers are willing to buy, which means that resources move towards those products that are in high demand, right? This is something that you should be knowing, that in a market economic system, firms produce goods that consumers are willing to buy, which are in high demand, so resources will move towards those products that are in high demand. And the government has a very limited role here, mainly focusing on protecting property rights, enforcing contracts, and maintaining law and order. And the government will not intervene in a market economy or in businesses, right? That there's no government intervention, and the role of the role of the government is also very much limited to what we discussed in the previous video. And a good example of countries that are following a market-based economic system is United States, or let's say Singapore. But you know what, guys? What no country in practice in the real world now, no country in modern economies are now a fully, completely market economic system. In fact, all the countries are now mixed economies, where you also have active government intervention involved as well. But in most countries are mixed economies, but mixed economies has elements of both the market-based system and the government making decisions as well. But technically, a mixed economy is actually a market economy with government intervention. So the focus, the shift, I mean, when you say that we have a mixed economy, what we're saying is that we have a market economy, but it also will have government intervention. But no economy is a pure market based economy, because it's now not possible for the governments not to intervene and do something about, especially when there's market failure and markets are failing to allocate resources efficiently. You learned this under this video, that market economic system is so efficient, but it could fail to achieve desirable and social outcomes, and it could end up doing things that the government doesn't really wants it to do. And but then, if it's a pure market economic system, the governments cannot intervene, right? Now let's look at the characteristics of a market economic system. See, I mean, in the previous video we talked about what economic system is, and I also introduced, by the way, what a market economic system is in the previous video. But now let's look at let's sort of look at the characteristics more formally now. So we know that a market economic system is an economic system where economic decisions are made through the interaction of buyers and sellers. So instead of the government deciding what to produce, how much to produce, and for whom to produce, these decisions are made in the market using prices. So prices basically send signals, and prices give instructions. So in a market economy, you learn that we are heavily relying on something that is called the price mechanism, and I introduced this word price mechanism in the previous video as well. We're going to be discussing it in more detail in this video as well. And when you talk about price mechanism, I mean, this means that when prices rise when demand is high, right? And prices fall when demand is low. And these price changes automatically help allocate scarce resources, which means that there is no central planner, there's no government, there's no ministry of the government telling firms what to do. Instead, prices do the job, right? And again, a common misconception, that is the government completely absent here? No, I mean, the government is not completely absent. The government is still there, but its role is limited to protecting property rights so that people feel safe owning businesses and assets, and enforcing contracts so that buyers and sellers can trust each other, and maintaining law and order so markets can function smoothly. And overall, the government has, no to minimal influence over prices and output. And, you can safely say, I mean, it doesn't really, if you have 100%, if you have 100% pure market economic system, it doesn't really have any influence over prices and output. And prices are going to be determined by demand and supply and not by the government. The government is not going to tell us that, you should sell apples at $10 a kilo or something. But and so how do resources, if I were to ask you this question, that students, how do resources move in a market economy, and how are they allocated, or how do they move in a market economy? And one of the very coolest things about a market economy is that you will say, Sir Adil, you know what, resources move automatically. But how do they move automatically? Simply through price changes. Because but why do even price change in the first place? Because of changes in demand and supply. Students, you already know that. So when demand rises, prices rise. When demand falls, prices falls. And as prices subsequently change, resources move towards the products that are becoming more popular. So if this is demand and supply and this is price, if demand goes up, right, prices would start going up, and you'll see an extension of supply, meaning that resources would move towards products becoming more popular. So firms would increase their output, and they'll increase their output. You can clearly see this is representing an extension in supply, because prices would sort of cause an extension, and new firms would enter the market supplying this product as well. So there would be, so the supply would match demand at this point. So resources move towards products that are becoming more popular, while if demand goes down, if this is demand and supply, and if demand goes down, then people would reduce supply, because some of the producers would exit the market, and some of the producers would probably supply less to match demand at this equilibrium point. Because when demand goes down, prices would go down, because demand represents willingness and ability to buy, or willingness and ability to pay. So if demand is going down, people would want to buy less and even pay less, so prices would adjust automatically in that context. I mean, prices would reflect what value buyers place on this output. This is a very important line that I've said right now. Prices actually reflect what value buyers place on the product. So if prices are going down, buyers are valuing it less because of fall in demand. So resources move away from products that are becoming less popular. And guys, remember that producers follow profits. Producers follow profits. They produce more when they feel that more profits are going to be made. While workers follow wages. While resources follow prices. Resources follow prices. More resources would be allocated to the production of this product, because the prices are going up. And when prices are going up, that will signal profits to producers, right? So they would end up allocating more resources. And that also means that more workers would be hired to produce more output, and that could mean that more wages will be paid to workers as well. So, and like I said, workers follow wages. So it's all interconnected, guys. And the reason why I'm going a bit deeper is so that I want you to just I don't want you to teach economics in a very textbook way. You can do it yourself. You can read those textbooks, but grasping the concepts, and that's what make economics so interesting to understand, right? So what I am saying is that, so guys, when we talk about the characteristics of a market economic system, we say that you have private ownership of the factors of production. And private ownership of the factors of production means that in a market economy, factors of production, that is land, labor, capital, enterprise, are privately owned. It means that individuals and firms own factories, machines, land, and businesses. The government doesn't own it, right? But why is this important? It's important because you need to understand that the ownership creates very strong incentives. Because if a business succeeds, owners benefit. If it fails, owner bears the loss. And this is an incentive. It's an incentive for the owners, because if businesses succeed, they would earn profits, while if the business face losses, owners would bear that loss. And it's also important for the owners to bear that loss, because if because they own the factors of production. But if these factors of production or the businesses were owned by the government, then what's the incentive to be efficient? Because they could end up making losses, and they don't have to bear that loss. The government has to bear that loss. But no, that is why we're saying that this ownership creates strong incentives, both in case of profits and in the situation of losses as well. And it is because of this incentive that resources would be efficiently allocated, right? This would encourage this sort of encourages efficient allocation of resources. This is again an important point, that it encourages efficient resource allocation. It encourages efficient resource allocation. This is a benefit. It encourages efficient resource allocation is a benefit that we're talking about, and a characteristic of a market economy as well. Number two is profit motive. See, firms in a market economy aim to maximize profits, and profits play a very important signaling role as well. Profit plays a very important signaling role as well, and so do prices, by the way. But higher prices signal profits, and profits signal that more resources should be allocated over there. So higher profits means more firms enter the market, and lower profits or losses means that firms would leave the market eventually. And this helps redirect resources. It helps redirect resources to where they are most valued by the consumers. So guys, profit isn't bad. Profit is a signal. If an industry is making high profits, it means that consumers value that industry. They're purchasing that industry's product. They're paying a high price for it as well. They're offering that industry good money, and the producers are responding. So profit isn't bad. It's a signal, and that's why we say that the entire economic system is so good and so cool, because it allocates resources to where they are most valued, right? And loss-making firms and low-profit firms would automatically exit the market. So, got it. And so when you talk about, another very important characteristic is that there's we treat when we talk about competition and incentives, and these are all the words that you need, because these are the key characteristics of an economic system. That there's a lot of competition, and then the role of incentives. When you talk about incentives, you're talking about what role does incentives play in a market economic system. So there's one golden rule for the firms, or one golden rule of the firms, that firms will try to keep their prices low. And why would they try to keep their prices low? Because of competition. And I mean, they can only keep their prices low, and they can only sustain and live with low prices if their cost is low. Otherwise, they would end up making losses. So to keep prices low, cost must be low. So firms would constantly try to cut down waste, and cut down any unnecessary cost, and they would constantly try to improve efficiency, and would end up using better technology. And all of this would result into efficient allocation of resources. And all of this is so important because it makes the business efficient, right? And we talk about we talk about actual competition, that this happens when there are many rivals that are already in the market. And because of competition, because you see, you have to understand that in a market economic system, anyone can open a business, anyone can exit the business. So anyone can open a business in an industry, anyone can exit, and there won't be any difficulties in laws and regulations imposed by the government that are making opening and not opening of businesses and sort of too difficult. So if I want to open a business, I can, and compete with that firm. And so because of competition, and again, another advantage is that because of competition, firms can't charge very high prices. And because of that, consumers would benefit from lower prices, and would also benefit from better quality, because every firm would try to outsmart the other rival by improving quality and offering lower prices as well. So it's very easy to enter this market, or enter this industry and exit from this industry. This easy entry, easy exit. Write this down: easy entry, easy exit. I can start a business, I can exit from this market if I am incurring losses. And so you won't really have the government telling us that no, you can't do this business, you can't compete here. And you won't really have barriers to open a business and exit, even when you are suffering from losses. And so when we talk about potential competition, we are saying that, this means that firms can easily enter or leave the market. And, because firms can easily enter or leave the market, it means that even if there is less competition, even if you don't really have a lot of competition right now, but that firms can easily enter the market or leave the market. But the fact that any firm could enter the market easily, you have a threat of new firms entering, which actually forces the existing firms to stay efficient and to improve quality and keep their prices low instead of charging high prices. So what we're saying over here is that in a market economic system, both actual competition and potential competition results in lower prices and better quality for the consumers. And this is also not only a characteristic but an advantage as well. And guys, competition is very good because competition encourages firms to reduce cost, it encourages to improve quality and efficiency for the business. It also forces guys inefficient firms to be out of the business. I mean, if you're inefficient then and if you have a lot of competition, you will automatically exit the market because competition punishes inefficient firms. So you have the survival of the fittest, or you can say survival of the most efficient in a market economy because there's a lot of competition in a market economy. Also, guys, the role of incentives is very, very important because you have incentives for the firms. Guys, remember that markets reward success and punishes failure. Remember that we're talking about markets, we're talking about an economic system where that is governed and run by the market mechanism. Meaning that if the government is not going to help you or neither tell you what to do and what not to do. Everything is going to be done through the price mechanism, which is the market mechanism based on demand and supply conditions, along with the fact that you have a lot of competition. So you need to survive, guys. So markets reward success but punishes failure, and think of it like a carrot and stick. Carrot reflecting success, or you can say higher profits, and punishing failure like stick means you're ending up with losses. And so what we're saying is that firms would respond to consumer demand. See, you have to understand that higher profits reward firms, right? Higher profits reward firms, and higher profits rewards those firms that respond to consumer demand. They innovate themselves, they produce goods efficiently at lower cost as well. And higher profits, I mean, the fact that everyone else is making higher profits and you're making losses, so losses punishes firms that ignore consumer preferences and are inefficient, right? So higher profits are rewarded, and those firms can only thrive that are making profits. And losses for loss making firms, especially those firms who are making losses, they would exit the market automatically. So market economic system punishes inefficient firms. And you'll learn that in a planned economic system, if the firm is inefficient, the government really doesn't wants the firm to close down, and the firm, loss-making inefficient firms would still be operating in a market or command based economic system where all the control is in the hands of the governments, and so the government doesn't really have profit maximization as an incentive. So the government really doesn't really cares if the firms are making losses. I mean, they wouldn't really want people to lose their jobs, because they have the economic welfare at the forefront and at stake, right? So right now, guys, moving forward, you'll also learn that there's also incentive for workers in a market economic system. I mean, workers are also incentivized. I mean, there's clear cut incentive for workers as well, because workers, and by the way, workers are also influenced by incentives, and you have incentives for workers in a market economic system because workers can earn higher wages by developing in demand skills, and accepting more responsibility and accepting more work, and also by being productive and efficient. So they would end up with higher wages because of all this. And workers who sort of lack skills, they're unwilling to work, and they're like inefficient workers and not coming late at work, or let's say those workers who are geographically immobile, they can't really switch jobs. I mean they may earn low incomes or none at all. And why is this important is because if the entire economic system was run by a planned economy or command based economy where the central planner of the state runs the show, then workers wouldn't really have the incentives because you coming up with better efficient work. The entire command economy or planned economic system is sort of inefficient and less productive, and because their focus is quite different, and so workers also wouldn't really have the incentive to uh, you know uh, improve their skills and be efficient and productive, when almost all the workers would be paid equal amounts. And there's no point in me improving my skills when I know that people who aren't really that skilled are also be paid the same wages. But if this was a private sector, then definitely those workers would be paid very high amounts. And so that's why we say that in an economic system, workers are also rewarded accordingly, and they have the incentives as well. Now, although one argument against this point is that it creates an unequal distribution of income, well, that's true, but then the efficiency point is also a very valid argument. And the thing is that the government can, sort of make sure that this unequal distribution of incomes and wealth is controlled and mitigated through coming up with various policies to reduce income inequality. But again, the thing is that if this is a market economic system and a market based system, the government really can't do much about reducing income inequality through imposing maybe taxes which are known as progressive taxes. Write that down: progressive taxes. You'll be learning about this in government intervention as well, by the way. So even if for those who are understanding it, well and good. For those who are not, it's okay. You're already going to learn this in government intervention, which is our next chapter or next topic. So what we're saying is that the government could come up with progressive taxes to reduce income inequality by taxing the rich and spending that money on the poor. But then the government is going to tax the rich, which means that the government is going to tax those firms who are making huge profits, and also tax those workers who are earning high incomes because they're efficient and skilled. But then that's government intervention. The government in a market economic system can't really aggressively intervene and impose so high taxes. So that is why, in the world, a pure market based economic system actually failed. The world initially, the market based economic system failed. So the world tried to sort of see a planned economic system, which failed as well. And that is why we see a mixed economic system now. So, and so if you look at this diagram, we are saying that, and this diagram is actually explaining another way to explain price mechanism, that resources move towards those products for which demand is rising, while resources move away from those products that are becoming less popular. So if the number of air journeys are becoming increasing in popularity, the demand will increase, and the number of sea journeys are becoming less popular, then the demand will decrease. So you'll see firms investing more in air journeys, and you'll see less ships and less cruises, while you'll see more airplanes flying, and you'll see more of their frequency or traveling, more airplanes traveling on the same routes back and forth, because more resources are now allocated towards air journeys which are in higher demand. So when the demand for a product rises, the demand curve shifts to the right, and we know that prices subsequently increase, and firms end up making high profits because of it. So more resources flow into that industry. You don't need to sort of show the diagram and show, oh, you know what, look, you make hundreds of arrows here, and show, oh, you know what, there's an extension in quantity supplied happening, and oh, you know what, this is how it's happening. You don't need to show all that. Just make a diagram, sweet and simple, like neatly drawn like this, and just write it down instead of scribbling everything all over the diagram. Just simply write it down. Just make the diagram there, sweet and easy. And just say that demand curve shifts to the right, price rises, firms end up making high profits. So more resources flow to that industry. That's enough. And when demand falls, price falls, price falls, profits fall, and resources move away from that product. So resources basically move away from declining markets into profitable, thriving markets. And that's how market economy constantly adjusts itself, resulting in an overall efficient allocation of resources. Right, guys? So what we learned up till now is up till here, that a market economy uses prices, profits, and competition. A market economy uses, number one, prices, number two, profits, number three, competition, to decide. Prices, profits, and competition is part of the price mechanism concept, the market mechanism, how the market mechanism allocates resources. Because all of these things are actually interconnected. They're not separate things, by the way. So to decide, the market economy uses prices, profits, and competition to actually decide what gets to be produced, how is it produced, and for whom is to be produced, with minimal to no government intervention. And I just wanted to go through price mechanism, which is another feature of a market economy. By the way, we have already discussed, by the way, price mechanism, but just it's written here. I just wanted to go through it again. Now let's talk about something that is really important in a market economy, the price mechanism. And see, the thing is that in a market economy, prices are not fixed by the government. But had this been a planned economy, the government would have said, oh, you know what, for the next 3 years, you're fixing prices for potatoes and tomatoes at $100 a kg, and prices will never rise. So in a planned economic system, it's not based on demand supply. So even if the demand for potatoes rises, prices will not rise. It will stay at $100 because the government decides that, and the government doesn't decides prices based on demand supply. Now, obviously, if demand is going up, it creates shortages and surpluses, but those shortages and surpluses based on changes in demand supply stay there. They persist. So the government decides prices not on demand supply, but based on what it thinks is the correct and the right price for the welfare and the benefit of the people. But that system, economics says, or capitalism says, or market economics says, that system is inefficient because it creates subsequent shortages and surpluses, and the government would have to subsequently deal with that. And the government really doesn't have a goddamn mechanism to deal with that. But we do have a goddamn mechanism to deal with that, known as the price goddamn mechanism. So in a market economy, like I said, prices are not fixed by the government, but in fact, prices are determined by demand and supply. And buyers and sellers together decide these prices through demand and the supply. And so, if the prices are rising because of a rise in demand, that signals shortages. Remember this thing, if demand is rising, it means you have a shortage now, prices would start rising, there would be an extension in supply and a contraction in demand, and that restores equilibrium. The same concept being applied here. You already know that, by the way. So when prices start rising because of higher demand, this signals a shortage. And what does this shortage mean? It means that demand is more than supply, and it means that more people want the good than what is available. Right? More people want the good than what is available. So what happens next? Consumers respond by buying. So prices start rising in the market because consumers want more than what is available. So prices start adjusting and readjusting. In fact, that's the right word. And when prices start readjusting, consumers respond by buying less or looking for substitutes. So you have a contraction in demand. Consumers are now going to buy less or look for substitutes, cheaper alternatives, while producers know that they can earn higher profits, so they are incentivized to increase supply. And all this is actually what's behind this is your signaling plus incentive mechanism in action, because prices are signaling consumers and incentivizing them to consume less. It's also signaling and incentivizing producers to produce more because they now have more profits in that. So both sides means consumers and producers automatically adjust their behavior. No government instructions are needed. The government doesn't really needs to worry and wake up the next day and say, oh, you know what, producers, you gotta do something about your shortage. There's no see, in a market economic system, the consumers and producers will sort their shit out themselves. In fact, how will they sort it out? The price mechanism will sort it out for themselves. Sweet and simple. See, my way of teaching is that I teach through conceptual learning and making you understand the concept rather than you rote learning it. You must know that what is being written in the books and why it is being written in the books, right? So, because that is what makes it interesting. And because of that, you learn better. And when you learn better, you write better. When you write better, you get better marks and you get better scores than the rest. Now, if demand is falling, so prices will fall. And suppose that prices start falling. And why are prices falling in the first place? See, why are prices even falling? Why the heck are they falling? Because there's a surplus, because demand has gone down. Or supply could go up, but let's base demand. So the signal of a surplus, and falling prices is signaling a surplus, and a surplus means the supply is greater than demand. So it means that too much of the good is being produced and supplied than is being demanded. So again, prices fall, and because of that, the behavior of the consumer and producers changes automatically. Why? Because now the consumers are encouraged to buy more. See, you have a surplus now. There's a surplus. So when prices are going to fall, sorry, my bad. Just a second. You have a surplus now. This is okay. So this is a surplus, right? So when prices would fall, consumers would be encouraged to automatically buy more because prices are lower. So consumers are signaled and incentivized to buy more because of falling prices, while producers are signaled and incentivized to produce and supply less. Or maybe stop, some of the producers would entirely stop producing that good and probably exit the market. So the market would and the market automatically recorrects or self corrects or self heals at Q1 and P1. So the market corrects itself, guys. Simple. So markets are self-regulating. That is exactly why we say that markets are actually self-regulating. The government doesn't need to step in and regulate the markets. In a market economic system, markets are self-regulating. Prices rise and fall, and people respond automatically. And this is the price mechanism. Number one, it solves shortages. It removes surpluses, and it results in an efficient allocation of resources. And when I was doing my masters, I still remember when I was doing masters in economics, my professor once said, "Hey guys, you know what? Prices act like traffic signals. It tells everyone what to do." He laughed and then he went away. So I still remember this line deep down. You don't need to write this in the exam, just for your own, knowledge, that prices act like traffic signals, telling everyone what to do, when to stop, when to start, when to go. Green light, go, produce more. Let's say. Anyways, coming back. There's also something that is known as consumer sovereignty. Consumer sovereignty, this is again a characteristic of market economic system, that we say that consumers are in control of what is being produced. Uh, how? How? Because when consumers demand a product, firms respond by producing it. So if consumers stop buying a product, firms stop producing it. So firms don't decide. See, firms don't decide freely what to produce. They follow the consumers. So consumers technically vote with their money by increasing or decreasing demand, and that is what is, and then producers follow that. So that is why we say consumers are sovereign. There's consumer sovereignty. And why does consumer sovereignty matters in a market economy? Because the thing is that in a market economy, firms survive only if they satisfy consumers, and those businesses that ignore consumer preferences make losses and exit. So consumer choice shapes the entire economy, basically, right? Also remember, there's limited government intervention. And let's finally, guys, talk about the role of the government. So in a market economy, government intervention is limited. The government does not set prices. The government does not decides what output levels are to be produced. Instead, it focuses on protecting property rights, enforcing contracts, maintaining law and order, and the market is left to operate freely through demand and supply. So if I were to wrap this up, what I'm saying is that in a market economy, number one, the price mechanism, number two, consumer sovereignty, number three, limited government intervention work together to make markets self-regulating and efficient. I want you to write this down as I speak, and I'll say this again. Yeah, what was I saying? I was saying that in a market economy, the price mechanism, these are the three essential features of a market economic system: price mechanism, consumer sovereignty, and there's limited government intervention or role. All these three work together to make markets self-regulating and efficient, and there's efficient resource allocation as well. And technically, not only have I explained the characteristics, but I've also explained the advantages as well. And now I'm going to be just quickly I'm going to be quickly going through these advantages, and then we'll come to the disadvantages. Now, guys, as we talk about the advantages of a market economic system, most of these advantages we already covered. Just to quickly run through it. Firstly, the fact that resources shift automatically and quickly reflects changes in consumer demand. That itself is an advantage of the price mechanism. And price mechanism is a key function or feature of a market economic system, right? So what we're saying essentially is, and this is, by the way, the biggest advantages of a market economy, because in a market economy, resources shift automatically and quickly when consumer demand changes. But why is this an advantage? It's an advantage because the government really doesn't need to step in. It focuses on its own domain. Secondly, the markets self heal and self adjust. All subsequent shortages and surpluses due to changes in demand and supply automatically are eliminated. So it ensures that yes, the market has a mechanism that if the demand goes up and that creates a shortage, or supply goes up, if that creates a surplus, the market itself has a mechanism to sort that out. So, and how does all this happen? It happens through the price mechanism. When the demand for a product increases, prices rise. When demand falls, prices falls. And these price changes give information to producers about what consumers want more of and what consumers want less of. And this information then results into an incentive and a signal for the producers to produce more or produce less. And also, by the way, for the consumers as well. We also saw that consumers also behave and react accordingly. And firms respond by expanding production. But focus in your answer, if you're explaining price mechanism, if you're asked to explain price mechanism, you don't really need to explain the consumer side. I mean, you can very slightly and just say that consumers also adjust behavior, but primarily the examiner at IGCSE level is looking for the producer's side, that how do producers respond and react. So firms would respond by expanding production through an extension in supply when demand rises, and reducing production or reducing supply through contraction in supply when demand falls. So no government instructions are needed, and the market does it on its own, and that itself is an advantage. And so as a result, the golden point is that resources tend to be used when they resources tend to be used where they generate the highest value. And this means that there would be less waste in the markets and the economy, there would be higher productivity in the economy, and resources go to those goods that people actually want. So there's no misallocation of resource. There is no misallocation of resource in that context. If the demand for something is going up, resources will automatically flow in that direction. And firms and workers and the owners of the capital who and by the way, all those firms, all those workers, and the owners of the capital who ignore these changes in demand, if the demand is going up, they should produce more and allocate resources to in that direction, because that is reflecting that consumers value that good. And if they're ignoring all this, then they are punished through losses, and they will eventually have to exit the market. The second point that is that cost and prices may be low because of competition, which is another advantage of a market economy, that cost and prices may be low because of profit motive and competition. And we know that firms want to maximize profits, and competition forces the firms to be efficient, forces them to be efficient, because the inefficient ones will be punished. So firms would try to reduce cost, avoid the waste, and use better methods of production. And if they don't, then consumers would ultimately switch to competitors, and they would end up making losses in those firms who aren't really considering all these efficient stuff. In the end, remember that firms would try to, because of this competition, firms would try to produce at the lowest possible cost. And you can write that this would result into a cost efficiency. Firms would try to cut down cost. Usually some books also use the word productive efficiency. If you don't use it, that's fine. You can say cost efficiency at this level, at the IGCSE level. But firms produce at the lowest possible cost, at least they try to, or let's say in a theoretical way they do, and they end up charging lower prices, which is very, very great for consumers love lower prices, right? So that is again a benefit for consumers, because that increases consumer welfare, and this is again an advantage, that it increases consumer welfare, right? So also, guys, in a market economic system, you have improved quality of goods and services, because a market economy encourages better quality. Why? Because firms are competing for consumers. There's a lot of competition, so firms are competing for consumers. And if one firm improves quality, others must follow. Otherwise, they would lose customers. So firms would improve production methods, they would innovate, cut down cost, make their own existing products more attractive. So better quality, guys, better quality becomes a way to survive in a market economic system, right? Also, you have wide choices for consumers, because in a market economy, many firms are producing similar goods, and each firms are trying to offer something different through innovation and product differentiation. And this means that consumers get different brands, they get different prices, they get different quality levels, higher quality, better quality levels. So consumers can choose what sort of best suits their taste and best suits their income and preferences. So again, consumer welfare goes up, consumers are happy. And don't write happy, this is for your own understanding and explanation, but economic terms, consumer welfare goes up. So overall, a market economy, what it follows is that overall, number one, a market economy is efficient because resources move to where they're most valued. That is number one. Number two, prices and costs tend to be low. Number three, quality improves due to competition. Number four, consumers get wider choice. These are the four things that if you write in the exam, you will get good marks. Remember, guys, you don't have to write in a lot of detail in the actual exam. My videos are a bit detailed because I just want you to get the logic of things rather than just rote learning stuff, because I want you to make economics more fun, more interesting, and make it more relevant. Now, guys, we'll be focusing our attention to the disadvantages of a market economic system. Now, guys, we are going to be discussing the disadvantages, and remember that the disadvantages or the limitations of a market economic system are also basically known as market failure. The key term that we're using over here is market failure. And when we use the word market failure, what we mean is that the resources are not allocated efficiently from the society's perspective. Resources are not allocated efficiently, but from whose perspective? Like, because in the advantages you were saying that resources are allocated efficiently, but then who is saying that they aren't? The society. Who's complaining? First, get this straight. Who's complaining? Society is complaining. I'll tell you why. Resources are not allocated efficiently from society's perspective. So the markets are allocating them efficiently on their own, in their own world, in their own realm. They are doing it in their own life, in their own reality. But society is saying, no, hang on, you aren't. So allocated efficiently from society's perspective, and because of this, it creates undesirable outcomes. Now, I want you to hear this very straight, that just because a market economic system is efficient, I want you to hear this, do not copy right now, and write this, by the way, just write it right now, that just because a market economic system is efficient, that does not automatically means that it is desirable as well. Because economists have a complaint, I mean the social economists who are representing society, they complain that, I mean, market economic system is a capitalistic economic system. It favors the rich, poor suffer, and they only take into account their own self-interest in the decisions that they make. Well, there's no harm in taking into account your own self-interest, but that creates some undesirable outcomes for society, and resources are misallocated only from the society's perspective, and that is what market failure is all about. So it creates harm to society. I mean, it creates undesirable outcomes, creating loss of welfare for society. That's another thing that you can write: creating loss of welfare for society. And honestly, the disadvantage of market economic system or the market failure that we're studying, I mean, this necessitates government intervention. That is why now most of the economies are now mixed economies, because in mixed economic system, I mean, these disadvantages of or the market failure would be catered or looked after by the government. The government would do something about it. But if it's a market economic system, the government can't actively and aggressively intervene to regulate and correct this market failure, and the market failure would persist. Now, the first thing is that consumers in the private sector may only take into account the cost and benefit to themselves, and the cost and benefit to themselves are known as private cost and private benefit. Now, before I sort of explain further, I want to make a disclaimer here that in this video, I'm going to be briefly running through the disadvantages. I'm going to be covering the market failure swiftly, as in quickly, but briefly. Why? Because I had covered this, I'm going to be covering this in a detailed video, which I will be posting. The next video would be a detailed video on market failure, and I want you to cover it from there. This would be an overview on what market failure is, accompanied by that detailed overview in the next video. So consumers in private sector may only take into account the cost and benefit, which is private cost and private benefit. And the next video that I mentioned would be explaining in detail what private cost and private benefit is. And so, I mean, and this is one of the biggest problems of a market economy, because in a market economy, you need to understand that consumers and private firms usually think about their own cost and benefit. I mean, they will ask questions like, I mean, they would do stuff and they would do things and they would allocate resources because they'll ask questions like, will I make a profit? If yes, then I should make this. I mean, I should make this product. But if I won't be able to make a profit, I shouldn't be making this product. But what if this product is very much beneficial for society? So even if you're having a loss or you won't really make profits, but still society wants it. But then now what will happen? So obviously they won't look at what society wants. Society's welfare is harmed then in that case, because the decisions that are made by consumers and firms in a market economic system are based on their own private benefit and private cost. That is based on their own self-interest. So they will ask questions like, will I make a profit, or will this benefit me personally or not? But then they would often ignore the cost that is imposed on others, and they would ignore the cost and the benefit imposed on others. For example, let's say that if I am consuming something, let's say if I am consuming loud music, I'm enjoying that, I'm having fun by listening to loud music, but then that is disturbing my neighbors. But then to hell with them, right? I mean, I'm not really bothered about what's happening to my neighbors. If it's I'm enjoying it. I'm listening to it. So what I'm saying is that usually people, consumers and producers, they ignore the cost that is imposed on others. Let's say, for example, and another economic example. This wasn't really an economic example about the music that I gave, but an economic example is that factories may dump, waste into the rivers. They dump their waste of the factories from the factories into the rivers instead of, I don't know, recycling them or using them for some, recycling them and doing something about it. Just dump it into the rivers, because if they come up with some sort of a system to do something about the waste, that would cost them. And why should they incur that cost? So firms may dump waste into the rivers, and this would help them avoid unnecessary cost, and that would increase profits. But then it pollutes the environment and it harms the society, because it harms the rivers and it affects fishes and it affects the fishermen's livelihood. And all these costs are basically known as external cost. External cost, that means that they are imposed on third parties who have nothing to do with your business. But then, like I said, fishermen's income would be affected, because, or even tourists would be affected, because you're spoiling the river, which is an attraction to tourism, right? And all this, by the way, is explained in detail in the next video. So that is actually the downside of the profit motive. While profit motive encourages efficiency and results in efficient resource allocation, but from a society's perspective, that may result in undesirable outcomes, because when we have a profit motive, although we are efficient, because incentives are playing a key role here, but then those incentives are just private incentives. So firms and consumers make decisions based on private cost and private benefit, while they ignore the external cost and the external benefit. Hence, they ignore the broader cost on society, right? So these external costs are also, there's another keyword, another terminology that you'll learn in the next video, is basically these external costs are also known as negative externalities, right? They are known as negative externalities, and if you ignore negative externalities, you're technically ignoring the broader social cost. You're only considering or factoring in the private cost, right? Now, the second thing is under provision of public goods. I think we've already covered what public goods are in the previous videos, but public goods will not be produced by, firms, because another major disadvantage is that there's under provision of public goods, and, public goods like street lights, national defense, they won't be produced by the private sector, because private firms would struggle to produce these goods. Why? I mean, you see, if you remember that public goods are those goods that are non-excludable, and they are non-rival. And non-excludable means that you can't really stop others from using it, and non-rival means that if others use it, then the benefit to you will not diminish. So because if others are taking benefit from the same street light in the neighborhood, then you can't stop others from consuming that street light or using that street light. Neither, if they're using that street light, that doesn't means that you can't. I mean, that really doesn't stops the benefit for you and for others as well. So they're non-rival too, and this creates students a free rider problem, meaning that if I can use it for free, if you have installed a street light and you can't really stop me, and if I use it, then the benefit to you won't even stop. Then you pay it. I mean, why should I pay it? And if you have paid it, then I'm going to have a free ride on it. So the thing is that public goods will not be produced by the private sector in a free market economy, because the government, the private producers cannot charge the users as well for this, because no one will buy it, because of free rider problem, because everyone knows that if I buy it, then I can't really stop others from using it. But in the case of a private good is excludable and rival. I mean, I can stop others from using it because it's excludable. I've bought it, I've paid money for it, I can stop you from using it. And if you are using it, then the benefit for me gets lesser and lesser each time you use it. Like if I'm eating an ice cream and you take it away and you eat it, then less is available for me. So it's rival as well. And this is actually what makes private goods to be sold in the market, because only those people will, because there's no free rider problem in private goods. It's only in public goods it's a free rider problem, because no one would want to purchase public goods, because everyone would want to have a free ride on others' money. They would want others to purchase it, and then They know for the fact themselves that they're non-excludable and non-rival. I mean, others cannot stop us from using it even if they have paid for it, and they're non-rival. If even if we use it, then the benefit to the others isn't really reducing, so we can, better use it. So the thing with private goods is that private firms don't really find it profitable to sell, public goods. Although public goods are desirable, people want them, society wants them. Society wants flood defense, law and order, street lights, national defense. These are all public goods, right? But private firms struggle to provide these goods because they can't really charge users for it, because no one would want to pay for it, and people can enjoy without paying for it, and this creates a free rider problem. As a result, private firms often do not provide public goods at all in a market economy, and that is why the government provides it, right? Also, guys, merit goods, merit goods are beneficial goods for like people, like education and healthcare, and we're going to be looking at merit goods in more detail in the next video. But a market economy may also lead to underconsumption of merit goods. I mean, they're underconsumed, such as education and healthcare. Because education and healthcare provide long-term benefits to individuals and to society. People consuming education and healthcare, they not only benefit themselves, but they benefit others as well. And others are basically, whenever you say there's a benefit to others, we're talking about an external benefit. It benefits others, right? So there's a third party benefit involved as well, which is also known as positive externality, which we will cover in the next video. But this is just a brief sort of thing that, for example, if I'm more educated, then I will make my life around myself and others people's life much better. And if, let's say, I take care of my health, I go to the gym every day, I take care of my health, I'm working out, then I'm productive. I'm productive as a teacher, so you benefit. Wherever I'm working, my firm benefits because I make sure that I bring a lot of value on the table. I'm not absent every day because my health is good and check. So, I mean, others are benefiting from it as well. Not only I'm benefiting because of my good health, but others are benefiting around me as well. So, there's an external benefit as well. But the thing is, so merit goods and education and healthcare provide long-term benefits. I mean, the social benefits or the benefits to society are much more than the private benefits, and that is because there's an external benefit attached to it, or third-party benefits involved as well, right? And that is why we say that these goods provide long-term benefits to individuals and society. But the problem is that if they do provide so much benefits to society, and then the long-term benefits to society, or let's say the social benefits to society, is much more than the private benefits to the individual, then why is the society under consuming it? Like, why do people under consume it? The reason is that consumers lack information. They are short-sighted. They only focus on the short-term benefits, and as a result, they make poor or inefficient choices. So this market failure has to do with information failure. Consumers aren't really aware of the right information, and they don't really know that how much can this good benefit themselves and others around them as well, right? And even if they knew how much this good benefits others around them, they would still not factor this into account, because a consumer would consume only and only for its own private benefits, not for others, not for any external benefits. But the thing is that the consumer is not even aware of how beneficial it is for themselves. They're short-sighted, and this is basically an example, clear-cut case of market failure where merit goods are under consumed due to information failure. People don't have the right information. I mean, how many times do you guys go to the gym, or how you guys go for regular checkups, right? And or you take good medicines every day, like vitamins every day and minerals, and we're all the time we're eating this junk food, unhealthy food, right? So information failure simply means when information is incorrect, when information is distorted, when it's misleading. I mean, we're all misled into just going out and eating in the restaurant, and all of this is good, but that's quite unhealthy. Anyways, coming back to demerit goods, just like merit goods are beneficial, we also have demerit goods, which are actually that are actually, I think demerit goods isn't mentioned here, right? I think demerit goods isn't mentioned here. I would want you to mention it if it's not mentioned. Let's call it 3A. I mean, demerit goods are overconsumed. Demerit goods are, no, it is mentioned, by the way. Demerit goods are overconsumed. I just saw it. It's overconsumed. Demerit goods are overconsumed, right? And it's overconsumed again because, and demerit goods are harmful goods like cigarettes, alcohol, gambling, like having sugary drinks, having unhealthy food. These are all demerit goods. So, I mean, junk food, cigarettes, and they're overconsumed because, firstly, advertising can influence consumers negatively. And I mean, if advertising can influence consumers negatively, then why the hell is the advertising going on? Because firms just consider their own private benefit. They just want to make profits. They want to make profits. They're concerned about wealth and incomes and profits. Whatever goes to society, how many kids die, whatever happens, I mean, they don't care. So that is what we're seeing. That okay, fine. The system is rewarding. The market economic system is rewarding. It's efficient. It takes into account the price mechanism. Price mechanism ensures efficient resource allocation. There's a role of incentives to play here. Everything's good and fine. We agree to that. But then, come on, dude. I mean, you're taking into account your own private benefits. What about what about the nuisance you're creating in society? So that's market failure. It creates undesirable outcomes. It may be efficient, but it creates undesirable outcomes. So people may underestimate this harm. People may underestimate that these demerit goods are actually harmful. I mean, that's why we are over consuming junk food. We are over consuming sugary drinks and all of that. So they underestimate the harm. They are persuaded by marketing, and they end up making irrational choices. That's what we're seeing. So, and the whole system, the whole market system is designed in a way that it promotes, because ultimately they cash on it. Firms cash on the fact that consumers are short sighted. They cash on the fact that there's information failure. They cash on the fact that consumers will not look at the long term costs and benefits and would just look at the short term private benefits and private cost. If something is beneficial, they find it, tasty, or they find it, they feel that it's going to benefit us, they would end up consuming it. That's why we see so many teenagers vaping and have smoking and, into all sorts of rubbish stuff like alcohol and all of that. Again, because, and companies cash on all this stuff, right? They scale it up, they leverage it, they make it sound like, this is what you need to do. And okay, guys, so this is again a downside of market economic system, or a downside of capitalism. That while capitalism would create more incomes and employment and jobs and create more wealth, it would create undesirable outcomes from a society's perspective. And that is why the government needs to step up and do something about it. And that is exactly why 100% pure market economy, no one is a 100% pure market economy. That's why we say that we have, mixed economies. Another very, 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 very important disadvantage or market failure is where, is about income inequality. Income inequality, right? Income inequality. I mean, think of it like this: like, high income earners can save money, they can invest money, they can buy shares and earn dividends, and over time their incomes and wealth would increase. They would buy more cars and more houses. But what about the low income earners? They would end up struggling to meet basic needs. But why are they low income earners? Why are some incomes high earners and others are low? I mean, if you're born to a poor household, you'll end up with, ending up going to, bad schools, again, bad education, bad jobs, bad incomes. Again, it's a poverty cycle. And that's why capitalism is actually, it has some sort of an evil attached to it. Well, I mean, yes, it is efficient, but then the evil is there as well. So society has a problem with it. So it doesn't really benefits everyone, frankly, and that's what we're studying. So low income earners would suffer because low income earners struggle to meet basic needs. They can't save and invest money and buy houses and buy shares and buy cars, and they would just keep on falling behind further. So capitalism, or simply market economic system to be precise, rewards rich while poor still suffer and struggle, and this causes the income inequality to widen over time, and that is why it results into an inequitable, unfair outcomes between the rich and the poor, right? So the income disparity between the rich and the poor just widens, and that is again a very important disadvantage or market failure. But despite all this, I mean, what we see is that market economic system is efficient, and it results in efficient resource allocation. Market economic systems, their market economies are innovative, but then they can also lead to market failure, like inequality and over provision of demerit goods and under provision of merit goods, which is why some government intervention, if even if not a lot of government intervention, but some, I mean, you can't really ignore the government intervention aspect. I mean, the government really has to step in and do something about the demerit goods being overproduced. Maybe ban them, tax the firms. I mean, tax the firms who are creating negative externalities and destroying the environment. Penalize the firms who are dumping waste in the rivers. I mean, do something about it, guys. That's what we're saying. That is why government intervention is important. I mean, and that is why practically almost all economies today are mixed economic system. right? Good examples of market economic systems are United States, because United States is it has a very strong role of the private ownership. The government intervention is very limited, although there is government intervention. I mean, with see guys, by the way, I mean, when you talk about a mixed economic system, you say that a mixed economic system is where you have a market economy in action plus a planned economy in action. That is, you have the private sector and you also have the public sector. But by the way, I mean, okay, fine, so it's not 50-50, by the way, just by the way. It's not that you have 50% market economy, 50% planned economy, 50% private sector, 50% public sector, and it's not like that. It is not like that. Then how's it like? A mixed economic system is also a market economic system with government intervention. But the primary focus of a mixed economy, I mean, the primary role would still be, in the hands of a market economy or the private sector. But then, with some industries or some key industries in the hands of the public sector too. I mean, the public sector would also be allocating resources, like maybe, the public sector is taking, I mean, you have public hospitals, public schools, maybe public sector is providing agriculture as well, let's say, for instance. I mean, just giving you an example. And some key industries could be in the hands of the public sector too, depending upon which economy you're living in. But then, hang on, mixed economic system doesn't really mean 50% market, 50% planned, or 50% private, 50% planned. It's the face is tilted towards the private sector. The face is tilted towards the market economic system with government intervention. So whenever you have market failures or significant market failures, the government would step in and intervene aggressively or actively intervene, right? So United States has a very strong role in the private sector, private ownership. So even though United States is, I mean, and by the way, United States is also not a 100% pure market economy. It's a good example of a market economy, but it is a mixed economy. But it has limited or less intervention by the government and more. The private sector sort of owns and controls and makes decisions. Again, Singapore, United Kingdom, more market oriented economies. But then again, both these economies, United and Kingdom and the United States and Singapore, are also mixed economies because the government will intervene. Like I said, no economy is 100% market economy. And even when we talk about a mixed economy is also a market economy with government intervention. A precise way of to just make you guys understand is by saying that yes, in textbooks would define mixed economy by saying that mixed economy is where both the private and the public sector owns resources and makes economic decisions. Well, that's fine, but the primary yardstick still lies in the hands of the private sector. Got it, guys? So this is important. And now the next video I'm going to be posting on a detailed video on market failure, and that sort of ends our our topic of market economic system. And now we're going to briefly be looking at what a planned economic system is, and then we'll move to mixed economic system, where primarily we're going to be looking at government intervention. And again, like I said, market economic system is efficient. It rewards workers who work on themselves, it rewards producers in terms of who cut costs, make profits. It automatically punishes losers, and it automatically punishes loss making firms. It's a good system. Firms innovate, they compete, they make money, consumers are happy, although not all consumers, because poor consumers they're not happy and they can't really afford that product, and so there's an income inequality element attached to it. Well, that's fine. We cover it under disadvantages of a market economic system under market failure. We agree to that. But just because a market economic system is efficient doesn't really mean that it is undesirable. But then we can't really ignore the advantages that it provides as well. So we aren't really saying that a market economic system is bad. We're saying it's good, but then it has certain problems which you can't really ignore, and you need the government to solve them. That's what we're saying. And that is why mixed economic system is encouraged. And that is exactly why almost all economies in today's world, and modern economies, are mixed economies. Okay guys, so I'm going to be keeping it up till here. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you all in the next video. Until then, take care.